Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Reimagining the Buyer Consultation for a Shifting Market, with MAPS coaches Sarah Detmore and Jen Davis. Please note this webinar is being recorded and you will automatically receive the webinar recording. If you have questions for your coach, please type them into the questions box located in your webinar control panel. Following the webinar, if you have any questions about today's call or coaching programs, please email us at maps@kw.com. That's all from me. Sarah and Jen, take it away.
Thank you so much, Troy, and hello and good afternoon or morning, everybody. We want to thank you for practicing social distancing with us today and joining us from wherever you are, and just thank you for choosing to invest in yourself and your business right now and looking at some different ways we can reimagine our buyer consultation and our buyer business when we're kind of in an interesting time in the market. So let's start out by introducing ourselves. Jen, tell us who you are and what you do.
Thanks, Sarah. So this is Jen Davis. I am based in Springfield, Missouri. I was our lead buyer agent for the first 6 years that I was on the team, and now I operate as our CEO. So I'm our CEO. I still get the pleasure of running our buy side because it is my favorite side. So we're going to spend some time today working through this with Sarah on kind of the adjustments that we are making on, really hour to hour and day to day to make sure that not only are our consumers really confident, but also that our team members are really confident.
Absolutely. And guys, I'm Sarah Detmore. I am the VP of the buyer agent team with the Loken Group here in Houston, Texas. Also have the privilege and honor of serving as a one-on-one MAPS coach, and of course have the opportunity to partner with the lovely Jen Davis in hosting a fun group coaching program called Mastering Buyers 2.0, which is a new group program launch we're doing this year. We'll talk about that here in a minute, but let's get into our content here. We always want to respect your time. And of course, like Troy said, as you guys have questions throughout the program today, just drop the questions in the questions box on your screen, and we'll definitely save some time for some Q&A. So let's talk about some creative buyer consultations, guys. We know that, and we've all heard and learned that the best practice for a buyer consultation is going to be to meet a buyer in your office where we can kind of control the environment and control the conversation. But I think we can all agree right now, and especially in a shifting market, that as buyer agents, we have to adapt our consultation to what makes the most sense for our buyers, because we ultimately want to get face-to-face, voice-to-voice, build rapport with those buyers in a way that makes the most sense for everybody. So we have a list here on the screen of some creative ways that we have seen be successful for buyer consultations in the past, and also right now, and kind of what we're experiencing with what's going on in the economy and the market. So Jen, what have you found are some ways in which you can still host a powerful consultation that might not be in your office in your in Springfield? What are some things that you and your team have done before?
I think, Sarah, the biggest thing is making sure to meet the buyer where they are. And that means understanding the environment in which they're operating. So the customer is always right. That doesn't mean we're going to run out and show 5 houses without doing a consult. So we're still going to hold true to best practices of consult. However, we're going to adapt to where our buyers need us to be. So we're the professional, we're the expert in the market. So we frequently, even regardless of the current environment, we do a ton of our consultations, the beginning steps of it, on the phone. So what we're looking at for us is we're going to make sure that we're the same on the phone as we are in the field, right? That thought process of one company, one language. So we're going to start those consults on the phone, and if we need to move it into some sort of a Zoom format or Skype or a video conference of some kind, just to get that face-to-face to build up that rapport, that we certainly are able to do that. So those scriptings that you guys are using in the field also should work on the phone. You just need to make sure that you're bringing a high energy level. So stand up, smile when you talk, right? Making sure that they can feel that great energy coming through the phone or coming across on video.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so interesting. And guys, just real quick here, I'm seeing some notes in the question box that some of you guys may not have audio. It doesn't appear to be a whole webinar issue where not everyone has audio. So if you can hear us, will you just like put a number 1 in the questions box so I know that somebody out there can hear what we're saying? Okay, lots of ones. Just want to make sure that our audio is coming through, guys. Perfect. Woo, okay, lots of people can hear us, Jen. We're doing great.
Awesome.
So when it comes to the creative buyer consultation, you know, we have to meet the buyer where they're at. And I don't mean physically where they're at, right? If the buyer doesn't want you to come to their house, don't go to their house. Yet I think what we're starting to notice and what we can all expect to happen sooner than later is that the phone consultation piece and the virtual consultation piece could be very popular in the next you know, maybe 6 weeks, 2 months, 8 weeks, I'm not sure. So with this undefined time frame that we're working with, we just want to make sure that as buyer agents, we need to adapt to still giving ourselves the opportunity to capture the business when it's available. Because Jen, you and I were just talking about this before our webinar kicked off, was the buyers who are calling into our teams now and the buyers who are engaging in real estate right now are the buyers who most likely have to buy. Would you agree with that?
They absolutely do. And it's our job to guide them through the process and just like you said, meet them where they are. That can be an emotional state of meet with them where they are, understanding what their mindset is, what their concerns are, and making sure that we're diffusing them in a very genuine and authentic way. We've got the answers to questions about real estate. I don't think that either you or I, Sarah, would act like we're a coronavirus expert. However, we are a real estate expert, and we are
Right.
smart individuals that can take precautions to make sure that we get to meet those buyers emotionally, financially, wherever they are at this moment, to help them either now or put them on a pipeline report and help them in the future.
Right, exactly. And so let's go into that real quick, Jen, because you had a great segue into our next slide. Is no matter where the buyer is, and when we're skilled in a way to meet the buyer where they're at financially, emotionally, physically, wherever, and also considering an adaptive type of consultation, that does not allow us as agents the right to forego on any of our standards and requirements of communication or content that we have to have a conversation about in the consultation. So most of you on this webinar who have worked buyers before, or even if you haven't, might be familiar with this LP MAMA acronym. So Jen, talk us through what this looks like and how you've used this to get the information that you need in a consult in the past.
So it's basically, Sarah, you know, it's just a rough guideline of we're trying to find out as much information as we can from our buyers to best serve them. The relationship is the conversation, right? They talk about that in the book, Fierce Conversations. And as we build conversation, and as what happens is the more conversation and the clearer we can be on what the buyers, not only what their wants are, also what their needs are, the higher our conversion rate goes, right? So it's a direct correlation of conversation and conversion being the hardest skill set. So what we know is during a shifting time, if we can focus on the skill of conversation, the skill of conversion will follow along with it. So this is just a rough outline of the things you're trying to pull from the buyer so that you can help them. So we're trying to figure out, okay, what is their prime location that they want to be in? What about that's important? Is it school district? Is it proximity to work? What might that be? And going 3 to 4 questions deep to understand really what their boundaries are. Also a great time for them to download your app. If they've got really strict boundaries and they can do a drive around so that they can set those parameters within your app, what an amazing service this is. And buyers now have time potentially to do a little bit more of that, so we can be very clear on what those boundaries are.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then as far as price and financing goes, you know, that's where is their budget? Have they talked with a lender? We'll get into that with mortgage, but what price is important to them? Why is that important to them? Where's their down payment money coming from right now? Like, let's ask, where is that money? Is it in an account that they can get to easily, or do we need to have some conversations around that?
Yeah, and Jen, I love that you shared that, because really this LP MAMA acronym is really just that roadmap for making sure that no matter what type of consultation you may have to host, and guys, we might have to knee-jerk react and change things on a dime, because for those of you who have had any in-person consultations scheduled this week, that might look like a phone call to your buyer to give them the opportunity to or offer a different type of consultation if they're concerned about face-to-face interaction. For example, I know one of the buyer agents on my team, she has a consultation booked at a Starbucks that one of our inside sales associates booked for her for later this week. And as most of you are probably aware, Starbucks cafes are closed. We're not going to do a consultation in the Starbucks drive-through. So my agent needs to call that buyer and offer a different solution. So no matter what type of consultation you're getting into or have to redirect to still host to make sure that you are a value add for that buyer, this LP Mama is always a great roadmap and something that you should implement into every consultation, no matter the style of the consultation. And that kind of takes us to our next piece of information is specifically with that consultation, no matter the format. It's up to us right now as agents more than ever to really dig deep on the buyer's motivation and their goals. And we want to refer back to that often throughout the process, because guys, if you were to ask, 100 real estate agents right now, why now is a great time to buy? Jen, push back on me if you don't agree on this, but I would guess that probably 99 out of 100 agents that are polled would say, oh, interest rates are super low.
100%, that's what they're going to say.
Right. And Jen, is the interest rate the actual reason that a buyer would buy a house right now?
It's never the reason. It can push somebody off the fence a little bit. There's always an underlying reason, though. That may be an ancillary reason. It may be a benefit to the buyer. However, nobody wakes up one day in a rental that they love and they're like, oh, interest rates are low, I think I'll buy right now. That's never what you and I talked about earlier. They're not calling into your office and saying that. There's
right.
an underlying reason for the move, and I think that's what you're looking at. Is you're gonna dig deep and figure out what that is.
Right. Right, and as part of that LP Mama guide or guideline that we were talking about, one of the questions that we want to ask them is, what has the buyer interested right now in making a move, or what has them interested in buying a home? And they're going to give us a surface level reason, right? So, for example, if a buyer says, yeah, I want to move right now because I want to downsize. Most agents would take the downsize and run with it. And if somebody were to ask them, why is your buyer moving? Oh, they want to downsize. Yet when we, especially right now in kind of this weird transitional shifting market that we're in or could potentially be going into very quickly, we are, it's going to be more important, more so now than ever, where we're asking more about that downsizing. So great, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, what does downsizing look like to you? Oh, well, we're in a 2-story house that has 5 bedrooms and all of our kids are grown. In fact, our last kid graduates this May, maybe if school is still in, we don't know. And we really would like a 1-story house. My health is declining. I can't go up and down stairs super often. So really downsizing for us looks like going from a 2-story house with 5 bedrooms to going to a 1-story home with 3. Okay, great, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, and I appreciate you sharing that information with me. When we do help get you into your next home and help you move from that big 2-story 5-bedroom house to a 1-story with 3 bedrooms, what would that do for your family? And guys, that buyer might tell us, well, that would give me and my wife time to travel around in our RV, and we wouldn't have as big of a house payment, so we could travel and do some fun things. So I'm hearing as the agent, guys, that downsizing will ultimately improve that buyer's quality of life. So the downsizing is the surface level reason that the buyer is moving, yet I know through that conversation and asking more questions that downsizing to them looks like, and I know what it looks like, and I know it'll improve the quality of life for that buyer. And so the reason for that buyer to buy right now is to improve their quality of life, not to downsize. Jen, anything to add to that?
Honestly, Sarah, I think you nailed it. It is. Plus, now you know that they've got a kid graduating in May and they have some uncertainty around that. And those are things then you can move forward through a conversation the next time that you meet with them. follow up on that kid, right? Or how are they doing? Are they worried about graduation? Do they still get to graduate? We're still a service industry. So when you give all of that information and you're really listening, Sarah, your conversion rate has to be through the roof, because these people, not only are they talking to you, you're listening and you're reiterating to them what you've heard.
Right. And it's important throughout our process, and while we're out home shopping, whether that's in-person shopping or virtual shopping, or Jen, I know you're going to talk in a minute about how we can even write contracts without showing properties, which I know we're all anxious to hear. We must revert back to their goal of buying a home and what that will ultimately do for them based on the conversation that we had, to make sure we're always moving them forward, right? We all know through BOLD that logic makes people think and emotion makes them act. And so when we can get on an emotional level with these clients simply by asking more questions about their goals, not only have we uncovered a deeper level of motivation, we're able to manage that relationship long term and then help get them through our funnel and through our pipeline to where they want to go by the time they tell us, because we know how to have the right conversation to get them there. And so Jen, go ahead.
I'm sorry, really quick. The other thing I would do, guys, is we're talking about these people as if they're new buyers. Go back through your pipeline, right? Like, let's talk about the people that we've met a week or 2 weeks ago or a month ago. They may be in a different situation now than they were then. Their urgency may have just increased on its own.
Absolutely.
And making that phone call now to those buyers that are in our pipelines and saying, hey guys, I just want to check on you. I want to make sure that my motivation matches your motivation. And running through, where are they? How are they? What do they need? What services can we provide? Because we don't know what this is causing in other people's lives. We don't know what stresses are there. So that downside that may have been a luxury might now be mandatory. So we've got to look at all sides of it and understand what that looks like. So I know we're moving forward and we want to make sure that we've got time to answer all these great questions. When Sarah mentioned earlier, how do we write offers without showing property? What pool of buyers are we looking for? Well, guys, let's look at this. Let's talk about our investors, right? So we've got investors that have been on the fence for 2, 3, maybe 4 years because they aren't able to find the deal that they thought they could find. Now is a great time to get them off the fence. So when we look at it, iBuyers across the nation, typically they're funded by money in the stock markets. Well, the stocks have taken a huge hit, right? So let's take a look at those local investors that will help our local economy, and let's get them out and let's get them active. That doesn't mean that we physically have to show them a house. Investors are typically more likely to want a video or want a FaceTime showing, or if you've got good relationship with them, going and saying, I looked at this for you. Here are your 3 best options. And I think that we can get a really great deal. They've been sitting on the fence, and these are the people that have deep pockets and can do something now on more than one house. So what would it look like if you sold 1 buyer 4 houses versus 4 buyers 1 house? The end of the day, the transaction count is the same. However, the stress and headache and the exposure is way, way less. So understanding we've got this pool of buyers that has been dying to do something for a really long time. Let's talk to them about it. Let's look at that aged inventory. So take a look at what are your active days on market in your surrounding area. Ours are 19. So if I'm going to look for aged inventory, I'm going to look for something over 30 days. I'm going to look really hard at something over 60 days, and I am going to basically send them anything that's available over 90 days in the price range they want to be in, because those are the things, that's where we're going to find them the deal. And that's how you get clients for life, is understanding that there is potential right now to have a swing and to do great big business. These people will also remember that, and they'll come back to you then for all of your real estate needs, because you're the first in the door. You're offering a service that other people aren't offering.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't help but think about how, Jen, you were saying that these investors are ones that might even just want to do a drive-by down the street. I know there are some people on this webinar right now typing some notes in the question box, asking more specifically about they're in a shelter in place. What do they do when their city or town is in a shelter in place and they flat out can't leave? I know all too well, and I'm sure I'm not the only one here who has had an investor buy a house sight unseen. So, you know,
build protections into the contract, have a conversation potentially with your local broker and say, what protections can I build in for a sight unseen property? Make sure you protect the investor and protect yourself. But absolutely, if you're stuck in a shelter, and that may be coming for a majority of us, understanding that there may be out of area buyers that potentially will buy a portfolio with you just emailing them listing information. If a seller still lives in the house and you can't see a picture of the backyard, reach out to the listing agent. Hey, can this seller send us this picture? We're getting ready to make an offer, but we don't have a clear view of X, Y, and Z. I think there are ways specifically for investors to be able to sell property without anybody looking at it, including you, the agent. You just need to make sure that that caveat is in there, that you understand how to protect yourself and protect your buyer.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love all that, Jen, and the idea being that we have to get creative as agents. We have to get creative, and that's also part of where we're able to have our the Keller Williams community. We are known for our culture and sharing information, and so when you are successful in doing something, share it with people, right? A lot of you guys already know that we have a buyer mastermind Facebook group where we share a lot of information, and that's a great place to say, hey, I just did this for a buyer and it was successful this way because of these restrictions, and that's something that somebody else can R&D, right, rip off and duplicate for their own market, because we're going to have to get creative as agents to continue to move our business forward, because we can't rest on our laurels, and there are a lot of distractions around right now that we're going to have to overcome. And so that kind of takes us into our next piece here, where part of where we're going to win and get ahead of the market right now is by mastering our scripts and isolating objections. So I'm sure I'm not the only person on this webinar who has gotten a buyer objection where a buyer has told me, I want to hold off on buying a home right now because of what's happening with the coronavirus. Right, Jen, I'm sure you guys have gotten that in your market as well.
We were getting it, 2 weeks ago, I think, before we all were fully aware of the impact this was going to have.
Absolutely.
And so what, Sarah, I know you and I talked about it when we were on our group coaching call last Friday, the isolating the objection. You were the first one I heard it from when you were saying, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, are you concerned about the health concerns, or are you concerned about the financial concerns? Those are two different deals. If their money's in the stock market, it's different than if they're concerned about the actual getting the virus.
Right. And that's so true, right? The only way we'll be able to isolate and overcome the objection, because the goal is not to isolate the objection, right, Jen? It's to eventually overcome it. Yet we can't overcome it until we really know what they're objecting to. So let's go through this script real quick so we can leave some time to answer some questions. This is just an example of a objection that you might get now, considering what's happening. There's a lot of uncertainty in our market, and I love, Jen, that you brought up what exactly is the buyer objecting to? Because if the buyer says, I'm going to hold off, great, or help me understand what's changed, or what are you in fear of? Is it fear of you contracting this virus, or is it fear of you, is it financial? Is it economically driven? Is there fear of job loss? If it's somebody who says, well, I don't want to get sick, we got to meet them where they're at, right? We talked about that at the top of the hour, where we have to meet a buyer where they are physically, emotionally, mentally. And Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I completely understand. I would not feel comfortable with you entering somebody else's home right now or buying a home right now if you weren't comfortable either. I completely understand where you're coming from. And then we want to identify specifically and isolate that objection, right? Where we would say, Mr. Buyer, I'm curious, what specifically has you not wanting to buy the home? Is it because of the coronavirus? We would hear from them. It could be, oh, the safety, right? I don't want to contract the virus. I don't know whose house is filthy, who's been where, who's dirty, who's whatever. And then
that's
if
when
we
you
know
offer
that
those video tours and all
right,
that good stuff. Yeah.
We find a solution. Great. So Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, when my team and I can find a way for you to still view properties that that would make you feel safe, if that looks like I go in the house 10 minutes before you and I sanitize everything, maybe not in somebody's occupied home, but maybe a vacant home. I travel right now with Clorox wipes, Lysol spray, and 2 bottles of hand sanitizer. Does that mean I need to get you guys booties and gloves? Does that mean that, what do you have to see, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, to make you feel comfortable home shopping right now? Or does that look like virtual tours? Does that look like drive-bys, right? I know some of us may not want to go into a property right now, and that's totally fine. We can encourage a buyer to drive by the neighborhood. Sometimes just the drive-by helps at least eliminate a property, if not help a buyer see that based on their personal street view of them being in the neighborhood and the pictures they've seen online, that could make them want to make an offer. So
Sarah, you can also leverage the seller. You could also leverage the seller, and if it is not a vacant property, call the seller or the listing agent and say, hey, we don't want to disturb your seller. Our buyer is a little concerned, about viewing the home. Would your seller care to take a video for us? We can leverage somebody that already is in the home.
Yeah,
they still want to sell. They're still on the market. So we've got, there are lots of options,
Mm-hmm. Definitely lots of options. And guys, we want to use the last couple of minutes here and obviously respect your time to go through some of these questions. Please understand, if we don't get your question answered today, Jen and I we'll be getting a list of all the questions that were asked, and she and I will take turns in answering. Wow, words are hard. Answering those questions directly to if you do get your question answered. And one question I've seen on the questions box here repeatedly is, how do we overcome the objection on the flip side of somebody who might be concerned about contracting the virus, for somebody who might be concerned about losing their job, or somebody who maybe has their down payment tied up in the stock market and just has some financial uncertainty? My suggestion there would be, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I completely understand, and we are in some uncertain times, and I would never want one of my clients to buy a home if they weren't 100% ready. So if in fact, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, you do choose to wait, I'm just curious, what might you be thinking about while you're waiting? And Gary actually said that on his live stream on Monday, because there are going to be some buyers, guys, that just turn into a future buyer right now, and that's okay. Like Jen said earlier, when now's the time for us to really dial through our database and our pipeline, because buyers' motivations may have changed. Their timeframes might have been pushed up and their timeframes might have pushed back. And that's okay, as long as we are clear on where they are right now and we can meet them there. So for those buyers who are waiting, that's a simple question of like, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, don't worry, my team and I will be ready when you are. I'm just curious, what might you be thinking about while you're waiting? Because if that buyer's thinking about interest rates, or thinking about inventory in a certain neighborhood, or thinking about anything specific, you've just earned the right to stay in touch with them and provide them the information that they want.
Well, Sarah, and I think if there's an objection, if the question is, my buyer is concerned that they're going to lose their job, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I get that. It is a real fear right now. And we can protect you around that. We do have financing addendums that are in place. We can delay certain terms of the contract as far as appraisals and inspections and all those things until things settle down. We could potentially now, as a time for a contingency contract. There are ways to help people even that have concern over it. The ones that are just on the fence to be on the fence, Sarah, you and I talked about earlier, those ones that have a pretty steady job and don't have fear of that, they're just holding off to see what can happen. This is their opportunity to take advantage of the market. Right. Guys, a week ago, we were talking about that you were going to have to go above list price. We were talking about that you were going to compete with multiple other buyers for a house of your choosing. We, for the first time in 2 to 3 to maybe 4 years, depending on some markets, have the opportunity to negotiate with sellers. We have the opportunity to get you a great deal. What would that look like for you? It's understanding and that's going back to the whole thing of isolating the objection and understanding it. Once you know what the objection is, then we very, very clearly can have a real conversation around it. We're not tricking anyone. We're not talking people into buying a house if they're not comfortable with it. We're coming from contribution and we're understanding the objection, and we can either help them now or we can help them in the future. Either way is a win.
Right, absolutely. And there are a couple other questions coming up in the box, guys. And if it's okay, is it okay if you guys, if we go a couple minutes past 11:30? I want to make sure we have some time to get a few more of these questions answered, because I think they'd be beneficial for the group. One of the questions is, what about the objection? Well, I prefer to wait because prices will drop. And my knee-jerk reaction to that is, well, how do we know prices will drop, right? And then I go to shift tactic 9. Because and that's shift, S-H-I-F-T, by the way. In your shift book, tactic 9 is creating urgency and overcoming buyer reluctance. So now more than ever, guys, is an opportunity to refer back to shift tactic 9. There's actually an exercise in here you can do with your buyers. And for those of you who know what I'm talking about, you ask the buyer to tell you when the market has peaked as you're drawing an arrow or drawing a line down across the bottom of a piece of paper, and you dip the line back up and the buyer says right there, and they've already missed the bottom of the market. So there's no way for anybody to time the market, but shift tactic 9 is a great resource for overcoming buyer reluctance and creating urgency. And I would encourage all of you guys on this webinar to go back and read through that chapter, because it could really offer you some guidance and some data and information to have in your consultations right now to help the buyers really understand that we don't know if the market's going to, if prices will drop or if interest rates will go up. We know what's happened today or up until today. And if you guys go look at your local MLS, I know I looked at the Houston MLS this morning. Over the last 3 days, 645 properties have gone into a pending status. So that just means in the last 3 days, 645 buyers have bought a home. And that's the information that we're communicating to buyers right now, because people are still buying. We had over 1,000 new listings activate over the weekend.
And I think that's the whole thing, Sarah, is having the conversation with them and saying, I understand that you think that it may drop. And what if it doesn't? What if this is the time? And as sellers potentially start to pull back, and as sellers potentially don't put their homes on the market, and inventory can potentially go down even further, once we're through this, and I don't think anyone thinks that this is a long-term shift. I think it's more of a shorter-term shift. Once it's ready to go again, there will be still a lag of inventory on the market. So then what happens when buyers get ready again and there's still not enough inventory? Prices are going to skyrocket. You have the ability as a buyer right now to look really, really smart when you need to go and sell this same home 3 to 4 years from now. You bought in this little bubble that we're being given, that we've got the opportunity to capitalize on.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's you're right, Jen. We have the opportunity right now more than ever to be the local market expert, and that's something that I know buyers are searching for, and what will give us the opportunities as agents to build quicker rapport with these buyers when we can speak intelligently about what we're experiencing based on the market right now, yet having data to back that up also allows us to be that local market expert. And so there's a couple questions on here about what information can we communicate out to our buyers as far as safe home showing practices go. Those of you on this webinar who might be in a shelter in place, I understand that makes it difficult to go anywhere. And I actually wonder how long it'll be before we all get there. Yet for those of you who still have the opportunity to get out and get into properties, I do think that some kind of communication going out to your clients, or even just a phone call to your active buyers of like, hey, here are some precautions that we're taking for the next time we get out and see houses. Do you want to meet on Thursday at 2 p.m. or Saturday at 1? What works better for you? So use that as a way to get them on your schedule to home shop when you let them know what precautions you and your team are taking. So that way they might feel more confident getting out and looking at houses right now. Jen, anything
that's exactly
that you
right.
Yeah.
No, I think that's exactly right. And giving them the option of those virtual tours, that's probably the safest bet for anybody to do. And for those people that don't have the technology to be able to do that, then you're right, Sarah, let them know about your Clorox wipes and your hand sanitizer
Yep.
don't maybe, and just be very clear about it. We're going to make this as safe as possible. I mean, these same people that are going to look at houses are still going, to Wendy's, and they're still going to the grocery store, and they're still going to gas stations and those types of things. So they're still, if they're confident enough to go out and about and to go show houses, it is our fiduciary responsibility to make that as safe as possible.
Absolutely. And I've seen some things on here about just questions again in the box about doing a Facebook Live open house. And I think, guys, as we get into more conversation about any type of virtual anything, to Jen's point earlier, I would really encourage you guys to run that by your broker first, just to make sure that we go about things the right way. We wouldn't want a seller's personal property blasted on Facebook Live if they weren't comfortable with it. So I do think, though, there are some unique ways that we can do some different things that maybe we've never done before. And that's where we as buyer agents and just agents within a wonderful company have the opportunity to share some fun ideas. And what's working well in Springfield, Missouri might not work in Houston, and vice versa. What's working well in Houston might also not work in Springfield. But we have the opportunity to share ideas with each other, and we need each other now more than ever, to be quite honest.
We do. And Sarah, just to I know you're going to go through our slide next of what's coming with this group program, but just understand we had a very different presentation ready for today, right? And we were able to transition over the weekend. So we're going to do the same thing for our 6-week program. We're going to make sure that we've got up-to-date information and we're paying attention to what the market trends are now. And it always has the caveat of understanding that if you guys don't know what's going to work in your market and you don't think it's the same as Springfield or Houston, reach out to one of us. We're both coaches. We would love to hear from you. You're welcome to email us, and we're happy to answer any questions that we can. If we get the same question over and over again, we know that that's a script or an objection that we need to role play with each other to make sure that it's going to fit for somebody else in a different market.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so real quick, let's talk a little bit about this group program that we referenced at the top of the hour, because Jen and I do have the pleasure to partner with MAPS and host a group coaching program. Again, we're going to continue practicing social distancing with this group program. It's a webinar format program where we're really rolling out a lot of new content on how to just go mastering the buyer, different phases of the buyer agent's role, and also mastering the buyer process along the way. So you can see here on the slide, guys, that we are going to be talking from goals to numbers and time blocking and more in-depth conversation on consultations and just all the things that a buyer agent needs to master skill level first, and then how a buyer agent could then develop a team within a team for their rainmaker and go from a buyer agent role, stepping up into mastery through different stages to becoming that lead buyer agent and then running a buyer team within their rainmakers team.
Absolutely. I'm so excited, Sarah. And I think, we'll have some adjustments as this is a brand new program. And I think what we've already written may change week to week to make sure that we can meet you guys where you are. We want to make sure to provide value. The benefit of Sarah and I getting to partner is that we're also good friends, and we can make adjustments very quickly, and we can make sure that we can hit those hot button items that are for buyer agents specifically. So we can make sure that we are helping you in your business, so that we are shift proofing it, so that we can make sure that we're making sure that you guys at the end of this year have hit every goal that you want to hit financially, based on transaction count, and that we can help you make sure that you get the time with your loved ones that you now need and should be looking forward to.
Exactly. And so on the screen now, guys, you'll see that here's some information specifically on when our program will launch. It's going to launch next Wednesday on March 25th at this exact same time. It's a 1-hour webinar from 11 a.m. Central to 12 p.m. Central. So make those adjustments in your mind based on time zones. Now, Gary's also talking right now, Jen, about how it's time for us to really remargin our expenses. And I'm going to invite you guys to consider the difference between an expense and an investment. So whenever we are, looking for ways to grow our business, we want to consider that to be an investment. And so, like I said, let's practice social distancing together. And if you'd love to invest in your business, the cost for our group program for the 6-week program is $198. And you can go to the MAPS website. And Troy, maybe you can speak more specifically, Troy, if you're still here, on where exactly our attendees can go to register for our program should they be interested in joining us.
Yeah, it's on the MAPS group coaching website. Just go to mapscoaching.com and look up top. You'll see a group option, and you'll see Mastering Buyers 2.0 as a link. I'll see if I could post that in the questions box.
Awesome. We would for sure love all of you to join us.
Absolutely. And you guys remember, we will, if there are any questions we didn't respond to, Sarah and I will reach out individually and make sure you have those answers. And we are super excited to be on this journey with you.
Yes, and Jen and I could probably talk about buyers forever. So we will respect your time and respect your afternoon and getting back to your business, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, if you had any questions that went unanswered, we'll filter through these and reach out to you individually with an answer. And of course, if you have any questions for us specifically, feel free to reach out to Jen or I, either one. We are here to help you any way that we can, and look forward to having you guys all on our webinar that kicks off next Wednesday on the 25th. Oh, email address and phone number. Hello. You can reach me via email at Sarah, S-A-R-A-H, at thelokengroup.com.
My email address is Jen, Jen Davis, Davis, KW at gmail.com.
Awesome, guys. Well, Troy, I think we're all wrapped up here. Everyone have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for spending some time with us this afternoon. And we can't wait to hear all the unique things that you're doing with your buyers right now to keep moving your business forward. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.